we all have a unified need to reweave, and the word weave is very important, the fabric of our community. And why do I say that? Because if you're from New Orleans and you lived here and you got hurt from Katrina, you know that notwithstanding the fact that Katrina and Rita did not cause all of our problems, it frayed the intricate weaved fabric of our community that people take for granted exist all over the world. So we lost our homes, we lost our roads, we lost our health clinics, we lost our schools, we lost the underpinning that made it easier for places that got hurt but not nearly as bad as we did, but got hurt in isolation, to build back. And that's why our recovery has been so complicated as we think about the fabric that was tightly woven before. And so in that context, the other thing that is important for us to know, not only what we're trying to do, but understanding that the way to do it going forward is only necessary if we do it together. Now, this isn't the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts, and so I'm not trying to go to cheerleading school with you, but what I am trying to say is if you give a clear-eyed assessment of how you create success in a post-Katrina world, it's really kind of a reflection of what we should have been doing pre-Katrina. And so all of us learned this probably on our first day of kindergarten, right? Was that like if you your mama gave you a bologna sandwich or liver cheese? Y'all got liver cheese? Y'all remember that? My mama gave me liver cheese for that, right? Or somebody gave you turkey, but your best friend had peanut butter and jelly, right? The best way to kind of get a lot was to kind of share. You got this, I got that. Maybe if we put all our stuff together, we can both have something we want and we can both get something better, right? If you didn't have a lot of friends, or you wanted to get a job done and you couldn't do it yourself, you had to reach out. Who'd you go to? Who were your friends? Somebody that had your common interest, had your common thoughts. And before you know it, all of a sudden somebody says, well, let's go play kick the can out in the yard. Or why don't we play jacks? Now, for all you youngsters in here, I'll explain what jacks is. Hyped up on video games. Or marbles, right? Who had the cat eye? Now, you remember? Who had the cat eye? Right? All of that stuff. In order to play, you have to find friends, right? And then you put your assets together. And then you produce something new. Sometimes when you went to go play baseball or basketball or football, y'all remember everybody lined up? Somebody was a captain, you got to pick, and you prayed you won the last one? You remember that? Man, I hope I get picked. Whose team am I going to be on? Why'd you pick people? Because you thought they could bring value to what it is that you wanted to do, which was in 15 minutes. I don't know how we did this, but in 15 minutes we played Super Bowls in the St. Matthias schoolyard, right? That kind of idea that we learned very, very young, we forgot when we got to be older. And so the words we use to finding new friends, looking at people who have common ground, finding people that have assets that we need, is facilitate, have meetings of like-minded people who express interest. Link them together, introduce them to each other. How many times have you all done this? You know, a couple of matchmakers in here, right? Oh, you might think about maybe y'all might like each other, right? You know, that's important in our business too. You interested in helping people get into homes? I know somebody else that's trying to do that. It's a government sector, private, not-for-profit, faith-based. Why don't you go visit with them? That's called link. And then think about all the assets that you have that you can put together, that if put together can make more. That's called leverage. So Brian used those fancy words upside down, but we call it facilitate, link, and leverage. It rolls off your tongue that way. It's a little bit of alliteration. Facilitate, link, and leverage. F will come before L, two L's together, makes you remember it more. So say it right. Facilitate, link, and leverage. Right? So if you think about those two things, and then you think about, well, okay, we're housing folks. How do we fit into this grand scheme about how to rebuild New Orleans? It starts to make sense if you understand that you're a very important part of the mosaic and the fabric, right? Because we know in the neighborhoods that we grew up in, the house was important, right? It was first of all important to have shelter, someplace to go. So Stacy and all of our teams are trying to figure out like in American society, right, we ought to have a safe place for people to lay their heads at night, right? And homelessness is something that we ought to be able to address and eradicate in the United States of America, and why we've been concentrating on that. It's hard to really concentrate when you're driving down the street if you have all kinds of folks who are your fellow citizens who don't have a place to lay their head. What is all of that about? It's woven into a bunch of different things, right? So that's part of the fabric. The other is to have a safe and secure place for families to be, whether it's rental or whether it's ownership. But that house is part of what? It's part of a neighborhood. What makes a neighborhood work? Houses, families, strong families, united families, but that doesn't work if you don't have a school. And of course, in the afternoons, nothing works unless you have a playground. And if you don't have a playground, you don't have enrichment programs, then you got problems in the criminal justice system. It all starts to kind of weave together. And you have to ask yourself, where do I fit? And how can I be good? Not just the thing that I'm supposed to do, but how does it relate to all of my other partners in the oven? So in the city of New Orleans, what we have tried to do is to have meetings between and amongst all of the stakeholders that put together these places. And so we call it, just because it sounds reasonable, place-based development, because we were developing, redeveloping, recreating, restructuring places that we're based at. So we call it place-based development. And because we only have a limited amount of resources and a lot of damage, we have to focus our attention. So why don't we think about where we're going to go and where we're going to start, which is primarily in conjunction with decisions other people have made to put schools places. And so how does this all fit into rebuilding the city of New Orleans and creating a space that all of us can feel comfortable in? Now, we've made a lot of great progress in creating that larger mosaic that I just painted for you. Many of you know that we have hosted in the sports entertainment business 12 of the biggest events that the country has seen, and we did all 12 of them in your city in the last 120 days. Now, a place that's not up and moving and kind of heading in the right direction can't do that kind of stuff. So that's a good sign that we've gotten our feet, underneath us. Our unemployment rate in the metropolitan area of New Orleans is 2% lower than the national average. Our property values are up significantly. And we have a lot of big, fancy people, like Forbes and the Wall Street Journal and a whole bunch of people saying, oh, wow, that city's really turning around and moving in the right direction. We have stabilized the decline. We have righted our ship, and we're moving in the right direction. And all the indicators are good, and you know this already because you're the ones who helped make it happen. And one of the ways you made it happen was by getting in a room like this and creating partnerships between and amongst the federal government, the state government, the local government, either on the recovery side, right? So I see Pat here, you guys, or on the traditional side, money coming down from Congress and the President through HUD or other agencies, down into the state, down to the city, and you've tried to figure out how to weave them together and then create a mechanism, either through government, the private sector, the faith-based community, to get them to the ground. And that's what we're in the business of doing. But what you guys are doing here is critically important, because everybody, when we speak about the American dream, and we talk about having a place to live, and talk about home ownership, is keyed into this very simple notion of how you rebuild neighborhoods through giving folks a place to live so that we can raise our families in a happy, healthy environment. And using the tools that we all have available to us to leverage the assets. So I see Carrie sitting out here, and I'm reminded of Landrieu, who, through an unbelievable act of generosity, came and said, I'm moved by the possibility that we can lose a great American city. I don't want any publicity, I don't want anybody to know about it, but I'm going to put $25 million on the ground, and we're going to put 100 people in homes, which the program she ran, and they did. That is an amazing thing. That was all philanthropic, right? It wasn't not-for-profit. It wasn't just somebody coming from the private sector. It was an American citizen out of the goodness of his heart, he and his wife saying, I want to do something, and I want to prove to people that there's a process by which we can get that done. And so we learned a lot about how to do something quick and fast, right, and in a different way. We have issues of whether money's going to come down through the federal government or not, or where the banks want to play, or where the commercial lenders want to play, or where the real estate agents want to play. And I think all of us have learned, what I've learned, that the only thing that is succeeding in New Orleans right now, let me say that another way, the things that are succeeding the best in New Orleans right now are the things that are the product of partnerships and relationships, both horizontally and vertically, all right? Horizontally and vertically, between and amongst the federal government, state government, local governments, the faith-based community, the not-for-profits, the for-profits, all moving in the right direction at the same time, all doing their piece, all providing their responsibility, and all accepting their obligations. When you have a framework that has those particular pieces in it, whether it's healthcare, education, transportation, housing, you are seeing tremendous success. And there have been a ton of them in the last 24 months that all of you can point to and be a part of. And so I think the message that we have to the rest of the nation is that you can fix problems. It doesn't take a catastrophic, it should not, let me say this, it should not take a catastrophic event to focus your attention like near-death experiences do, right? In order for you to get this right. But we now are showing the rest of the nation the model that actually works in order to achieve a particular result. And it is collaboration, absolutely. And it is understanding that before we had waste, we had fraud, we had abuse, but maybe more importantly that we had ineffectiveness. Not because people weren't really thinking about it, but because we weren't as well coordinated as we should have been. So one of the things we've tried to do inside of city government, so what's my personal responsibility as the mayor of the city, is to take the things that I can control or things that I can influence, call them direct reports to me, okay? And say, look, go find a way to make this happen or tell me why you can't, right? And make sure that you don't come back to me until you told me that you went out there and found everybody that you could find in the geographic area that we live in that has anything to do with this, and ask them what they thought, ask them what they can do, ask them what they need, and ask them where they want us to be, and then ask them what they're going to do too. And then come back and help me figure it out, because y'all are the experts. I'm not. I'm just the mayor. I work for y'all, right? And so that kind of broad thinking is what goes on inside of our organization. And so if there is any involvement with anybody on my team, and we're not communicating to you that way, we want to, and we should, and you have to do that too, because that's the only way that it's going to work. You have to break down the silos. You have to break down the walls. You have to stay focused on the thing that we all are interested in. And I want to tell you two things about that, because this is a choice about which pathway you want to walk. And I call this common ground and consensus, because sometimes we mistake these things. None of us in this room agree on everything. There's not a person in this room that agrees with anybody else in this room about anything. And in that interrelationship, personally, and this could be true amongst government or not-for-profits, you can choose to focus your attention on the thing you disagree about, or you can choose to focus your attention on the thing you do agree about. You see this happening in Washington, D.C. right now, where people on the Democratic side and the Republican side have decided to focus on the things that they disagree about, because they think, I guess, that that is in their best interest. What are they interested in? I don't know. I don't like to try to impugn people's motives or intentions. I have no idea, but all I know, watching their actions, I conclude that they have decided not to focus on the thing they have in common. And they have decided to focus on the thing that separates them, on disunity, I suppose because they think if they can convince somebody that they're right, then somebody's going to get 50% plus one, and they're going to win and the other people are going to lose. That's what I call a zero-sum game. I do not live in that world. That's not the way my brain works. My brain works in, I know I'm different, I know we're not completely the same, but our interests seem to be somewhat aligned. And even where we're different, I want to park that for a minute, and I want to concentrate with you on the thing that we have in common, and I want to give you credit for being a good, honest person with integrity who wants to solve a problem, and I want to have a constructive, if tough, discussion with you, and then I want to get to an answer, and then I want to do it. Then I want to put that away. And by doing so, build knowledge, build trust, show how to get to success, and then try to create some kind of momentum to do that again. And the beautiful thing about that is it never ends, because there's always something to do. And if you find a way to succeed with somebody, then you can find something else. And amazingly, what happens is, all those things that you disagree with, they don't always go away, but somehow they recede, because people like getting things done rather than just fighting. That's not true about everybody, but it's true about some. But it doesn't happen by accident. You have to choose it. You have to choose it. And it is a pathway. We have examples of people in this city that historically have chosen the divisive path. And what we are all being called to do, in the last 2 years at least, is to say, look, I hear that was the way, we lost that way, let's try to find it this way. And let's try to talk to each other civilly and constructively, not softly, right? But with vigor, if we know that, we come to an answer. Now, that's common ground. The second piece is this, in case y'all want to know how I am. Y'all want to work with me, and you want me to work with you, this is how my brain works. The second thing is consensus and reform. And I want to talk about this for a minute. I'm a reformer. I believe that systems are broken. I think they have to change. And I'm aggressive about it, and I have been since the first day I walked into the legislature in 1988. As a Democrat that believes that government is an active agent for change and can help set the table for growth and economic development, I believe it's my responsibility to make sure the government works well, that it's efficient, that it doesn't waste any dollars, that it's tight, that it's flexible, that it's entrepreneurial, but that it lives up to its responsibility to do what it's supposed to do, right? And I'm also knowledgeable, because I'm a good politician, that 50% plus one rules. 50% plus one rules. It can turn a monkey into an elephant. It can. It can turn gambling into gaming. Yes, it can. It can turn a chicken into a duck. But as soon as the one changes, and the guy who had 51 now's got 49, now the new guy that's got 51 can change it back right away. And that's a fleeting victory. That's the power game. That's the zero-sum game, I win, you lose game that gets played over time, and then you never ever have any sustainable growth or commitment to reform. I like to govern from the 66% rule, or somewhere thereabouts, because I don't count really well. But if you can put 2/3 in the box, if you can put 66% in the box, that's called consensus governing. And if you can get 66% of the people to agree on a pathway, right, more often than not, whatever it is that you create will be sustained over a long period of time. So if we're in the business of changing whatever it is that we have, and we want it to last past us, and we recognize that it's not just about us, but it's about building a foundation for the future, you always want to try to govern to consensus. And the only way that you can get there is through, number one, choosing the pathway of common ground and choosing the strategy of consensus, which means that you can't have everything that you want. And it means you got to yield. But you have to do it in a constructive way. And you have to do it in a way that builds relationships, that builds trust. You have to do it in a way that's smart and that is verifiable by the empirical data that will take you and any other reasonable person to that place so that it can sustain itself over a period of time. Right? So, in my mind, that is what our administration is trying to do in every subject matter area in the city. And it is important to get it right, because if you want to know what we're going to do, what I tell my team, and what my team reminds me of when I get off track, is that you said to lay down the foundation, brick by brick, and that you would forego instant gratification or an immediate win for a long-term laying of a foundation that other people that come beyond us can stand on, because we recognize that we're just the stewards for the moment. We have a fiduciary responsibility to do it right, and we're here to prepare for whoever comes after us. And we want it to be sustained over a long period of time, so we don't want to go slow, but we don't want to rush. And there's a difference between going fast and rushing, right? So my team will tell you, this guy's the most impatient human being that I've ever met in my life. And they're right about that. I'm told that on a frequent basis, both personally and professionally. I'll leave it at that, right? But you got to do it in a way that's going to last. And last, it means you got to get it right, you got to lay the foundation, and it's got to be something that the community as a whole has had an opportunity to think about and buy into, so that it can be sustained over a long period of time. And if we can all kind of organize ourselves around that notion and that idea, whether you're focusing on, again, home ownership, or whether you're focused on education, transportation, economic development, whatever it is, you're going to create a foundation that allows the city of New Orleans to live for much, much more of a time and longer generations than if we do it the old way, which was division, living for the moment, not preparing for the future, And you know, whatever happened, happens, because we are just so susceptible to all of the bad things that are happening in the world. I would rather steel the city of New Orleans against all of the other things that are happening in the world by being so strong on the ground that we, for the most part, can withstand most of the things that will come our way in an easier way than we have been able to withstand Katrina. So the other day, I was with the head of Zurich International, and I said, "How you doing?" He said, "Man, last year we had more natural disasters and more responses that we had to respond to than we ever had in the history." Of course, I said, "Well, that can't be true, because Katrina was the worst thing that happened to anybody in the history of the world." Right? And he says, "Yeah, but last year, really." And I said, "Well, how's your company doing?" He goes, "We're doing better than ever." And I said, "Well, how do those two things work?" He goes, "We're in the business of responding to disasters by paying people money after they paid us premiums." He said, "But we were in a really strong position, and we were organized well, and we were prepared. Therefore, we were able to respond well. And even though we paid out more than we've ever paid out, we were able to withstand it because we knew we were ready. We had created resilience within ourselves, and now we'll be here next year to help other folks." As opposed to, this thing came our way that we didn't expect. We were weak. We weren't well prepared. It took our legs out from underneath us. It completely eradicated the fabric of our society, and we didn't have the strength to stand ourselves back up. And guess what? When we looked for our neighbor to help us, they were hurt too. And folks tried to come in and give us good things, but it wasn't enough, and so it took us longer. That's the old New Orleans. The new New Orleans has to be the New Orleans that is so resilient, so strong, has strong foundations and structures in each one of the things that we need, that the next time a Katrina comes, and another Katrina will come. Does anybody doubt that? Does everybody remember Betsy? All right, now I know a lot of y'all are too young to remember Betsy, but I remember Betsy, right? And Betsy was a bad storm. And lo and behold, some folks that lived in the 9th Ward, living in my house with me. The Caligarios and the Landrieux were sleeping. They had 20 of us in bedrooms, right? When people, and this was the same thing, 8th Ward, 9th Ward got flooded. Folks moved around the Broadmoor-Claiborne area, right? So a long time later, in 2005, right, we got Katrina. And so it's going to happen again. The question is, are we going to be ready? And what are we going to be looking for? And how are we going to build a resilient community? And in order to do that, we've got to get this piece right. And so I just want to tell all of you that I thank you for seeing, right? Because if you didn't see, you wouldn't have come. You wouldn't be here today if you didn't understand what it is that I just articulated to you. You may not have articulated the same way, but you're playing in that playing field. And I want to thank you for that. I also want to tell you that we are particularly happy that we have finally moved a couple of initiatives off the dime. It took us all a while to figure out how to make it move and how to get where it needed to go, and money got stuck, but we're doing a much better job. The city of New Orleans is. And I want to tell you that the state's recovery office is doing a better job, FEMA's doing a better job, everybody's doing a better job talking to each other and meeting. I'm leaving here to go tell Tony Russell goodbye. Tony Russell is a regional administrator for FEMA. He's retiring. It breaks my heart. The guy has been golden. But at President Obama's direction, FEMA has decided, basically to say, look, I'm going to give you what it is that you need. Got to ask me for it the right way. Got to be eligible, right? But I'm gonna give you what you, as opposed to don't give them anything unless they absolutely deserve it, and don't tell them about it, right? And if they don't ask you for it, then we're better. So we've met. Our team has met with FEMA 343 times. That's the truth. In the last 726 days. You know why? Because what used to happen is FEMA and the state and the city used to yell at each other. Monica, you guys would write the articles, right? He said, she said, oh, I'm mad at you because you said, did you really say, what did you really mean? Who was the source of that? High-ranking sources who will remain anonymous, right? Who are all those people? So what we said was, look, why don't we sit at the table and talk to each other? And if we disagree with each other, why don't we say that? And then why don't we try to drill down on this to figure out whether it's going to work? And that process, partnership, right? Facilitate, link, and leverage has produced about $400 million new dollars that was not coming our way, right, in the last 2 years. And that's what it is that I'm talking about. And so I want to just tell you about just a couple of things that we would feel good about, and you should feel good about because it wouldn't have happened without you. The Soft Second program is something that really just kind of got off track for a little while and got stuck. Both the state and Fano and the city of New Orleans kind of regrouped. Brian and his team helped put this together. We've had a fairly successful launch. What I want to call it is a restart. right, of the soft second program. And as of October 2011, when we announced a $52 million soft second program, which was designed for first-time homeowners to fill the gap, we have really kind of worked hard and made a lot of tracks. And so this program, which from our perspective, again, personifies the American dream, we have since October issued 54 commitments, $3 million in funds have gone out of the door. We have 31 fully closed homes. And that is a really robust start after we had the funding is based on need. The homeowners are all across the city. All of the participating participants completed a 12-hour homebuyer training class. And this process, again, helps them prepare for home ownership. A couple of just anecdotes. These are real-life people, but I won't call their names yet. But one of them was a young mother and a son. They were renting a small apartment in New Orleans East. Obviously, they dreamt of living closer to a family, a school, and a job. They received $40,500 in the soft second assistance to close the gap. And they're now closing on the house in Gentilly, and she lives close to her work at a bank on Chef Tour, and the little boy has gone to a school right nearby, which is one of the schools that we've worked on. The second one is a gentleman who's a retired longshoreman. He's a father and a grandfather. He was living alone. He was homeless after Betsy and Katrina. He received $63,500 in the soft second, and now he's closing on his house in Algiers, and he's got room, as all grandpas want to, you know, for their grandchildren. The third is a family on the West Bank. The mother works. She received $62,500 in the soft second. They're closing on a Georgia brick home in New Orleans East. And, you know, it's a wonderful example. And that is the work that has been done by the soft second program. These are not, when we get into this as experts, we throw a whole lot of monikers and names out. And what we always forget is the simplicity of the idea, which is we're trying to put real live people in real life homes, in real life neighborhoods. And so these things really matter. And so we're here today to announce really the second part of the soft second program. It's called the Affordable Home Development Program. We're going to issue the RFP this week. That either means today or tomorrow, right? Which one? Today. It's going to be finished this month. What day? We always ask that because, you know, amazingly when you say it, it's always the last day of the month. You ever notice this with you guys? It's never the first day of the month. You're going to do it in April. Then April 1st? No. The last day of the month. I get ribbed about that all the time. I'm still waiting for the guy that tells me it's the first, right? But in any event, this is an RFP. It's going to be for qualified profit and not-for-profit developers. There'll be a set-aside number of soft second funds for qualified buyers to purchase homes. And again, we have to, and we think this is smart, we're going to target areas, right, that are an important part of this place-based development strategy that we talked about, and we're also matching LLT and city-owned properties together to make them available. So we're going to talk about that today. The second thing that we're going to announce today is the allocation of home funds, right? $8.2 million in home funds are going to be allocated to 11 organizations that will deliver these housing services across the city. These organizations are going to create 164 rehabilitated units, and 4 of them are going to be newly constructed units. And I'm really grateful to Secretary Donovan and to HUD for supporting this particular effort. And so those are really 2 major concrete initiatives that are going to have real-life consequence to people's lives. Now, I'll add just this footnote to the national debate that they're having in Washington, D.C. right now, and the big lie that cuts do not have consequences. So Europe's gone through this difficult time. Watching Spain and all the stuff that's going on with the European Union, and folks are talking about austerity, or they're talking about growth. One of the things we've tried to do as we stabilize the city of New Orleans financially is to make sure that we understand that in the world we live in, government is getting smaller. It's got to get faster. It has to be more entrepreneurial. It's a very difficult time because we are constricting right now. But how you cut and what you cut and how you reorganize is really, really important, because you can cut so much that you actually bleed to death, right? You got to cut smart. You have to reorganize, and then, at least in my view, you have to invest. And this notion somehow that less is always more is not true. And that cuts always produce something better is not true either. Obviously, you want to eradicate waste, fraud, abuse, ineffectiveness, and inefficiency. I think we can get like 100% on that in the United States of America, right? Way above that 66% consensus mark, 100%. But it is absolutely true that if they continue to reduce community development block grant funds, if they continue to reduce home funds, if they continue to reduce the money that was used to help homeowners get in homes, less people will get in homes. And if we think home ownership is important, then cutting home funds that help people get insurance is not creating a less is more scenario. And in this country, I think that we have to have an honest discussion amongst rational policymakers on the federal, state, and local level that how government works and how it partners with the private sector ought to be generated to what creates growth and strength, not creates an emaciated, weak community and a society. And cuts have consequences. They always have consequences. Some of them sometimes are good or bad because they squeeze out inefficiencies and produce more effective, but some of them are just cuts that stop people from getting what all of us think is very, very important. And you now see, I see, as the mayor of the city of New Orleans, a pattern occurring where Washington says cuts to the states then don't take responsibility for the things they're supposed to fund, like mental health, or funding the appropriate number of DAs, or the Indigent Defender's Office, or probation and parole officers, right? And the consequences happen to be that there's more wall time in the hospital for people that are waiting for doctors to care for them, but they're not there. That is a serious consequence. Our funding through the Department of Health and Human Services that used to be used for paratransit doesn't come down, and so somebody that is a paraplegic winds up waiting and not being able to get transported to the doctor. That is a consequence. And as it relates to the federal government, in these particular instances, if they continue to cut these funds, they won't be available to help people do what the people of America say they want. And we have to have some integrity in words and ideas to produce the thing that we need. And so what I would encourage all of you, as you are the ones who are on the ground doing this work, to make your voice known, both to the local level, to the state level, and to the federal level, about what it really looks like on the ground and how different it is from the rhetoric that you hear, and not get stuck in just the political sound bites that make us all feel better about how we have to do more with less, right? You're going to wind up doing less with less, right? And at the same time have a responsibility to weed out any of the inefficiencies and ineffectiveness so that when you go speak, you can speak with authority about how every dollar that you're given can be invested and leveraged and turned over, right, to produce much more than it ever had. And if we can kind of do that, we will change the discussion on the ground and give back to the taxpayers of America a greater value for the investment that we make. And from my perspective, taxpayers, when they know the whole story and they understand it and they see the product, will always invest in the things that make America strong. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. And so when you take all of that and you boil it down, essentially, right, to what it is that we're talking about today, finding a way to put people in homes and give them stable lives makes America strong again. And it will be done with a complete and total partnership between the federal, state, and local governments, the private and not-for-profit sector. And that is the thing we need to stay focused on. That is what you have begun. That's what this journey today has started and brought together, and I would encourage you to continue to do so. So God bless you, and thank you very much. And onward.